It's time for Wise Money with Korhorn Financial Group with certified financial planners Kevin Korhorn, Mike Bernard, and Josh Gregory.
Welcome to another episode of the Wise Money Show with Korhorn Financial Group, where every week we're helping you take your next wise step in your financial life. Thanks for being here, friends. My name is Mike Bernard. I am your host. I'm also one of the CFPs on the program. With me in the KFG studios, my business partners and fellow CFPs, Kevin Korhorn and Josh Gregory.
We're focusing on the Roth Conversion today, but specifically, when should you be considering it? And also, what steps should you be taking to pull it off without any mistakes along the way? That's the key. We're helping you with that and more on this hour of Wise Money.
You know, they used to allow you a sort of a mulligan with the Roth Conversion. You could sort of do it over.
That's right.
Not anymore. So we're going to help you with those steps. But we're going to start with why do a Roth conversion in the first place. If you have a question for the show or you need any help, reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. You can call or text us 574-222-2000. That's 574-222-2000. Online, wisemoneyshow.com is where you can find us. And then all over social media, we're there as well. Just search the Wise Money Show. Okay, so like Josh said, what are the steps to doing a Roth conversion? And I don't mean press this button and sign on this line. No. All the stuff that goes before that. And trust me, there's a lot. We're going to go through it right now so that you can avoid those mistakes and capture this opportunity. That's what tax planning is all about. Avoid surprises, i.e. mistakes, and capturing opportunities. Before we get into those steps, though, why do a Roth conversion in the first place? And then when are some of the time periods you might want to consider? When is what we're in spring here? So when is the harvest ripe? Like when's the fruit ripe to consider a Roth conversion?
Well, to me, I think you need to pause and just consider what is a Roth conversion. You're taking money from an IRA that you have not paid taxes on yet, possibly. Maybe you already have, but it's in a tax-deferred account, and you're moving it over into a tax-free account. So why would you do something like that? Most people, when they're using, I'm going to go to the traditional IRA for just a second. When you contribute to a traditional IRA or you have a 401k at work, you're contributing to that account because you want some tax savings in the year that you earned that money. And you're hoping that down the road, someday in the future, you can pay taxes at a lower rate after you've enjoyed some tax sheltering for potentially a long time. Mm-hmm. Well, you do a Roth conversion when that someday has come. You found yourself now in a lower tax bracket than the year that you originally contributed. And so you're taking advantage potentially of being in that lower tax bracket. I want to pay the tax now and then get it into the Roth and let it grow tax-free forever.
I want to pay the tax now, but I don't need possession of the money right now.
Right.
I want to keep it invested and have it enjoy. Yes, it's choppy right now, and that's part of being an investor. You're going to go through choppy times and negative times, absolutely. But over the long period of time, that a consistently applied good investment strategy should overcome that, and you'd have those dollars growing tax-free in a Roth. Because you've made that Roth conversion.
Yeah, and I might argue that it's not that I necessarily want to pay the taxes now. I might never want to pay the tax, but
that's philosophical, Kevin.
Yes,
I don't want to pay taxes either.
Right. So there you go. No, but what I might want to do is I might want to shift that money, because if we take, just for simplicity's sake, we're going to say we have a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA. If we move money from a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA, it goes from growing and creating a more of a taxable event in the traditional IRA to creating a tax-free event in the Roth IRA.
A future tax burden compared to no future tax burden. And it's important to recognize it that way. I was meeting with, sadly, a widow earlier this week, and she's got about $2 million in pre-tax IRAs. Now, she also has life insurance proceeds, and she's got some Roth IRA dollars as well. There's no way she's going to spend all this money, and she knows it as well. And so I'm explaining the concept of the Roth conversion to her because she's just right now living on life insurance proceeds. And she didn't like the idea. I'm just going to tell you.
She didn't want to pay the tax, to Kevin's point?
Because in her in her mind, it's, I'm never going to have to pay tax on this money. This money's never going to be taxed. And so I'm not going to do this. Why would I pay? It was about $7,000 of tax that we were going to create by doing this Roth conversion. And trust me, I wanted to create a lot more. And she didn't want to pay it because she said she's 60 years old. She said, I'm not going to be here in 10 years. So I'm never going to have to pay on this money. And it's like, yeah, but your kids will. Word. Someone will be paying tax on this money. And by the way, because of this 10-year rule and how they've botched it, not only will someone pay tax on it, they might have to pay tax at a significantly higher rate because they need to take it out over a shorter time period.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, so that's where you need to have a vision for the money that's never had taxes paid on it. Who is going to pay the taxes? Because if you have $1 that's never had taxes paid, the question is, can you run that through the tax ringer, and how close to $1 can you get it on the other side? So is it the owner that should pay the taxes? Is it the beneficiary that should pay the taxes? Maybe. And it's not for this show, but that money should go to a charity, and no one ever pays the taxes.
Right. That's the scenario where the tax could be completely avoided. But most scenarios, someone's going to pay the tax during their lifetime.
Right. Okay. Go ahead. Well, so when are some scenarios? When is the fruit? Josh, I know you're doing a lot of planting this season and hoping to have a nice garden, and I hope to enjoy it as well.
Bountiful harvest.
And so, okay, so when is the fruit ripe for the picking with a Roth IRA? I know it depends on your overall financial plan, guys. This is once again a show about how you need a comprehensive financial approach to your financial decisions, your financial life. So you can't make this, if you hear one of the examples that Josh shares, you can't, if that's you can't just say, okay, I'm going to do this. No. Mm-hmm. That should just prompt you to begin that discussion with your CFP. But what are some of the time periods when a Roth conversion may make sense?
Well, so this is a kind of generic statement, but if your income is temporarily low, maybe you've been in a high tax bracket in the past, and that's when you were saving money into a 401k or into that traditional IRA. You were motivated by tax savings in the year you earned it. But now you have this window of opportunity where your income's down, and maybe you're in a lower tax bracket, so you could kind of redeem those dollars out of the IRA, get them into the Roth, and let them grow tax-free. Sometimes we see this for folks who maybe retire before age 65 or before age 70. Maybe they're not yet starting Social Security, but they also don't have a paycheck anymore. If you can live off of other assets, you might find yourself in a lower tax bracket and an amazing gap of income here where you suddenly have years where Roth conversions could potentially make a ton of sense.
Yeah. It did a Next Right Step video on this very topic about a month ago. So if you're not a subscriber to the Wise Money YouTube show, go check it out, because every single day during the work week, we've got content about these types of topics. So, Josh, that was the very first one that I had in the video. Second one that I'd consider, stock market crash. So that's a time when you look at your overall situation, and even if you say, well, I don't know, I mean, I might still be in this tax bracket in the future. Well, do you want that rebound when the stock market inevitably rebounds? Do you want it to occur in a account where there's a future tax liability, or do you want that rebound to occur in an account where there's no tax liability ever? Guys, I'm thinking back. In 2010, there was a big change with legislation. I'm going to talk quick. They removed the income cap where you could all of a sudden do Roth conversions, and they needed tax revenue so much. Imagine that, that they allowed you to do a Roth conversion and spread the tax over 2 years. I remember an individual at the time said, I'm going to convert all my money. It was over $500,000. Imagine moving $500,000 into a Roth IRA in 2010. What would that be worth today? All of it tax-free. Okay, if you like that idea, is it right for you? What are the steps to be doing to do a Roth conversion so you avoid mistakes, capture this opportunity? We're going to share that more coming up on the Wise Money Show with Korhorn Financial Group. Hello, YouTube. Thanks for being here. This is the Wise Money Show. You're watching our weekly 1-hour talk show that airs right here on this channel at 10 a.m. Eastern Time every Saturday morning. Also on podcast, same time, but also on a handful of local radio stations, which is why the content is as long as it is. You're peering in and watching the live recording right now. Make sure you hit that subscribe button as well, like I said, because we've got next Wise Step videos, content at 8-10 minutes long, taking one financial concept, applying it directly to your financial life. We've got that all throughout the work week. So turn on notifications, hit that subscribe button, like the content, leave comments and questions as well. Thank you very much. So yeah, this guy, we first did, so it used to be, there was an adjusted gross income limit. If your income was above $100,000, you couldn't do a Roth conversion. Isn't that crazy? And then, this is important history. And then the IRS said, wait a second, we need tax revenue because we're going to be spending money. So let's lift that barrier. And because we just went through the Great Recession, the Great Financial Crisis, let's give an incentive for people to pay taxes. And if you do a Roth conversion this year, we'll let you spread the tax over 2 years. And it's so interesting. That was 12 years ago. Now it seems like the government doesn't even care about tax revenue. It's like, we're going to do whatever we want.
We're just going to borrow in order to fund the government.
It really doesn't matter. But so I met with, we'll call him Bill. I met with Bill and we said, okay, well, should we take advantage of this? And it was, yeah, we should. And he had about $500,000 saved. We were like, okay, let's do about $100,000. We did the math, and it's like, okay, that puts you in this tax bracket. Good. And then he calls me like a month and a half later. It's like, I keep going over this, and I feel like we need to do more. Okay, well, what would $250 look like? And then he called me a couple months later. This was now in the fall. Like this was it. And he's like, Mike, I keep running the numbers. I don't know why I shouldn't convert all of it. And it's like, okay, that's going to put you in the highest tax bracket. I mean, that's real. That's the real deal. And he says, I know, but I know I'll be paying higher taxes, but I feel like the growth, the rebound following this recession, I want that in my Roth IRA. Mm-hmm. I'm like, well, I can't argue with that. And he did it. And then they moved, and he stays in touch, but I haven't talked to him in a few years. And I'm sure that 500 is 1.5 now.
That's awesome. It's fun to work with people who are that...
What's that?
Tax-free.
Tax-free.
Yeah. People who have that much foresight and are thinking long-term are fun. They're being that proactive.
Normally when you're sharing this, like, so when I share it with, you guys know who I'm talking about, the widow earlier this week, when I shared it to her, she was like, yeah, I don't want to do, that. Why would I do that? Blah, blah, blah. And then I had to then say, oh yeah, and paying that $7,000 of tax, you're going to have to pay that out of pocket. And we're going to get to that, YouTube. I don't want you withholding that money. And she's like, what? What? So I got to pay this? Like,
she thinks you're an idiot now.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it again before we do this. But
So this isn't a conversion story, but it's the contribution story, because when we were talking to the folks yesterday that had the event where they had all the money, and you're like, where do you put the money? And they're like, just invest it. And I'm like, what?
Hang on. There's a question before that.
Yeah, I'm like, hey, listen, those 2 car loans, those are gone. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah. And it made sense. So, and then I said, hey, you both work. We're maxing your retirement plans. Mm-hmm. But I had drawn up, the first thing that I had drawn up was the IRA and Roth IRA on the board. And he's like, well, why would we do a Roth IRA when I'm in this high tax bracket? I want to get the benefit of tax savings right now. I'm like, oh yeah, we're going to do that. Mm-hmm. But we're going to get that in your 401k. Mm-hmm. And we're going to do
bigger
this.
Bucket.
But I mean, you're talking to folks that are in their 60s who've never funded a Roth IRA.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And this is where I'm like, oh man, go now to a certified financial planner and get help.
Yeah.
Because these things you want to get started on.
And that's the thing, guys. We've talked about this before. It's not the purpose of the show, and we gotta get going. Mm-hmm. But if that's you, there's no embarrassment talking to a CFP.
No.
Kevin is thrilled to hear that. Let's get going. I can't wait to help you. Let's figure this out. You're going to be amazed. As opposed to, wow, I can't believe you've been doing this. What have you been doing? No, this stuff is not figure outable.
Yeah.
And so hold that embarrassment. It's not going to help you. Just set it aside and run to your CFP. All right, let's get into it. Well, I've got the steps, the track kind of laid out, and there's lots to talk about within each of those. So,
are we giving any more examples?
We can start there.
You guys haven't
Especially because
slow interwebs.
I've been using it.
Next week is all questions, so we've got time. We got room to run.
I spent the last segment trying to solve Wordle. Okay, so.
Jeez. Talked to your son about that the other night. I'm like, I'm not good at it. And he was like, really? I'm not. So I don't do it. So, all right. The Roth conversion. Should you do it? Number one. And then number two, if you should, by working with your CFP, how? What are the steps you've got to follow before you even pull that thing off? And we're going to help you with that right now. This is the Wise Money Show with Korhorn Financial Group. Thanks for being here. My name's Mike Bernard. With me in the KFG studios, Kevin Korhorn and Josh Gregory. Stay up to date on all Wise Money content. Find us online, wisemoneyshow.com, and then all over social media, wherever you're at, we are there as well. Search the Wise Money Show. Okay, before we get into the steps that you need to take before you actually do the Roth conversion, what are some of the other reasons you might want to consider doing the Roth conversion?
Yeah, I'm thinking of a scenario where maybe you've done the work with your certified financial planner to realize that your retirement is well funded. Maybe it's even overfunded. When someone has extra money in their retirement nest egg, and you probably are not going to spend all these dollars, then the question becomes, well, what kind of money are you going to be leaving behind to your heirs, to the organizations you care about, the people left behind? And often, you may find yourself also in a lower tax bracket than those people who might receive this money. And so if leaving behind an IRA is going to result in them paying more tax than you would have during your lifetime, a Roth conversion might make sense in a situation like that. And so I think it's important that you not only take a multi-year approach to your tax planning, but also be paying attention to multi-generational tax planning. Thinking in terms of where is this income going to fall on a tax return and who's going to pay at the lowest possible rate. It might be you. And if so, converting could make a lot of sense for the whole family.
And that would be at a later stage in life, and I'll just plug this now. Coming up in a few weeks, we're going to be starting a series that we're going to spread out over several weeks about the big financial decisions you've got to make by decade, starting in your 70s and 60s and 50s. And what Josh is pointing out is if you find yourself in your late 70s, early 80s and sitting around saying, I'm not paying much tax, you're probably not thinking about that. Yeah. But maybe your kids are starting to peer into your financial life to give you some assistance, make sure everything's in order. And if you're not paying any tax, that's the time period that Josh is talking about. You're looking saying, well, wait a second, if I don't need this money and I'm not paying any tax, but when the kids inherit it, they're going to have to pay some tax, maybe I convert some right now.
That's right. If you're in the 0% tax bracket, the 10%, the 12%, you just have to be considering this every single year.
Yeah.
It may even make sense when you go up into the 22% bracket or higher, depending on your circumstances.
All right, I want to get into the steps.
Let's get into the steps.
So if you're listening to any of this and you say, I think I need to consider this. I think this makes sense. I think I need to do it. What do you do? What are your steps? And the very first thing that you need to do is to do a tax projection. That's the very first thing. And not because we want to weed people out. We would want to weed people out because that sounds terribly boring to 95% of the population. Well, how many accountants are there out there in the world?
Okay. Not enough.
Yeah, not enough. So maybe 94% of the population. That sounds terrible. You first need to do a trial run. Okay, what will this look like? If I do this, how will it impact my taxes? So guys, what more on the tax projection? Why would this be the first step?
Well, because any financial decision in a vacuum makes sense. And so you don't want to make decisions in a vacuum. You want to make these decisions within the context of your current financial life and your future financial life. Because by doing a tax projection, and again, not only are we fond of doing a tax projection for this year, but a multi-year tax projection, you can get some sort of sense for what tax bracket should I be in? Where should I be paying these dollars? Because a lot of times what will happen is there'll be a financial event and someone has some money that they hadn't been expecting. And you say, well, where do those dollars go? Maybe some of those dollars should be just dry powder that you're using to pay taxes. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you want to talk about horrible, like do a tax projection and then use found money to pay taxes. Both of those that all sounds horrible, but it could position you for the future to have some diversity in your potential streams of income that will allow you the levers that you can move to adjust your taxable income.
Mm-hmm. I would also point out that the tax code is just full of landmines.
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many things that you could do to bring unintended consequences into your financial life. And you may be listening to a show about Roth conversions and thinking, yeah, I've got to do this. I've been talking about it for years. It's time to pull the trigger. Well, hang on. Make sure that you are checking the math on this. Make sure that you are not going to throw yourself into too high of a tax bracket or cross certain thresholds of income that suddenly take other tax savings away. It could result in you not only paying more tax, but then also losing certain tax benefits, which results in more tax yet again.
Bingo. I mean, that's the big idea. It's to run the math to see, okay, how much, I mean, ultimately what you're trying to problem solve is how much Roth conversion should you do? And the answer to that lies in exactly what Josh just shared. How much before you get into that next tax bracket? How much before you start having other income pulled in and be taxable? How much until you lose some tax deductions? How much until you lose some tax credits? And so the big one for folks that are in retirement and maybe in the 0% tax is how much Roth conversion until your Social Security starts becoming taxable. And then after that, how much conversion and how much Social Security gets pulled along with it, where your deductions aren't enough to fully take away all that income. And so you've got to do all of that math, and that's done in a Roth conversion.
That's exactly
a tax projection.
Right, and then keep going because you say, okay, now I'm paying tax on some Social Security. Do I stop there, or do I pay tax on all my Social Security? And you can get into a position where you're paying tax on almost all your Social Security, but you haven't yet filled up the 12% tax bracket.
Right.
Here's a real life scenario. We did this last fall, and we did the taxes on it this spring. It went perfectly. So last fall, the folks that I was serving, they finally both turned 72, and they both have to take money from their IRA every single year. It's a required minimum distribution. And when you total up their pensions, Social Security, and the two required distributions, that's all the money they needed. They didn't need any extra. And after all deductions, got their taxable income down to about $92,000. So if you're not a tax expert, if married filing jointly, approximately after all your deductions, the first 20 grand is taxed at 10%. From 20 grand to 80 grand is taxed at 12. 80 to what is it, guys? 170, 160, something like that is in the 22% tax bracket. So for the rest of their life, they were going to be in the 22% tax bracket. Okay. But they were barely into it. They were in it by about 12 grand. So, okay, guys, for the rest of your life, because these pensions are never going away, the Social Security is never going away, your required minimum distribution is only going to go up from here. It goes up a little bit every single year. Obviously, it depends on how your account performs and all of that, but the calculation forces you to take a little bit out every single year. So you're going to be in the third tax bracket every single year unless they drastically change the tax code, which is hard to fathom, okay?
Therefore, you mean it's hard to fathom that they would make it any better?
Correct.
But it's not that hard to fathom that it could get worse in the future.
Right.
We have very low tax brackets by historical standards right now. So your income might not have to get that high to find yourself in a future tax bracket that's even higher. And that's just Congress monkeying around with the brackets. I mean, they do that every so many years. And so just pay attention to the fact that we have a great opportunity to pay a little bit of tax. It might be avoiding even higher tax in the future.
Absolutely. And one of the reasons we did a tax projection was we needed to make sure all of our ducks were in a row. But the other thing is, how much could we convert and still keep our adjusted gross income below the limit where we'd have to pay more for Medicare? So more of the steps that you need to follow to do a Roth conversion, that and more, coming up on the Wise Money Show with Korhorn Financial Group. All right.
Okay.
Short break. We'll go right into step 2, determine how you'll pay the tax on the Roth conversion. And this is third segment. And so we'll at least, I don't know, do we even introduce the couple, even if we're not, the remaining steps, even if we're not able to hit them, and then we hit them in the fourth segment for the abbreviated WFRN show?
Yes. Do you want to tee it up with that and say
let's get through this second one. The pay the tax. I'll navigate it. I just don't think
if we don't get through
all
the
steps.
second one,
we will. Or
that one seems, well, maybe it's not short.
I'll navigate it. But third segment.
okay.
What are the steps that you need to go through before you do a Roth conversion? We're helping you with that right now. This is the Wise Money Show with Korhorn Financial Group. Thanks for being here. My name is Mike Bernard. With me in the KFG studios, Kevin Korhorn and Josh Gregory. Every episode of the Wise Money Show is on the YouTube channel. Go check it out. Go to YouTube, search the Wise Money Show, follow us there, subscribe to the show, and leave questions, comments. If you like the content, lots of content is posted there. Go check it out. All right, so we're into. All right, you've already worked with your CFP to determine, okay, does a Roth conversion make sense? Is this something you should consider? And where you're now working through the steps before you do the Roth conversion. Step 1, do a tax projection. Do the math. Figure out how much should you actually be converting. The second step is determine how you're going to pay the tax on the Roth conversion. You actually have some choice. And as Josh was teaching, explaining what the Roth conversion is, you're moving dollars from your IRA to your Roth IRA. Anytime money comes out of your IRA, it's got to be reported as taxable income. So this is a taxable event. The question, though, is how are you going to pay the tax on the Roth conversion?
Mm-hmm. And that's an important question to ask, because what a lot of people would say is, well, I'll just peel some money off the top. As the money leaves the IRA and goes to the Roth, I'll send a portion of it off to Uncle Sam and to my local state taxes and everything. The issue is, if you're under age 59 and a half, that portion that got sent to the government to cover the tax was not converted. And so it's subject to not only you have to pay tax on it, but also a 10% penalty. And, you know, we generally don't like people paying 10% penalties. It's just kind of wasting your financial life. It's not doing anything for you. And so coming up with an alternate source of income is important in a situation like that if you're under age 59 and a half. So I often think of people who have just inherited some cash, or maybe you just got a big bonus. Maybe your commission checks are extra large right now and you're just flush with a little bit more cash. Having that money available, yes, you could just go contribute it to an account, or you could just invest it in some mutual funds, or you can use it to cover the tax on a Roth conversion and get more money into that tax-free environment.
Well, avoid the penalty so basically the Roth conversion, moving dollars from the IRA to the Roth IRA, if you're not 59 and a half, that's no problem. There's no 10% penalty in doing that, as long as every dollar you took out of your IRA lands in your Roth IRA. But in order to cover the tax bill, if you decide to withhold taxes on that strategy, then every dollar that comes out of your IRA is not landing in your Roth. And therefore, yes, it still would be taxable because it came out of your IRA, but there would be a 10% penalty on those tax withholdings. So if you're younger than age 59 and a half, yeah, I don't like the idea of doing withholdings. If you're older than age 59 and a half, I don't like the idea of doing tax withholdings. I don't, because the name of the game is to with the Roth conversion. Here's the strategy. I want to pay as much tax at the lowest possible brackets. Yep, that's why I would do a Roth conversion. But then the second name of the game is I want to get as much money growing tax-free as possible. And if I withhold taxes, that means, yep, I've paid a lot of tax at low rates, but I don't have as much money as I possibly could growing tax-free in my Roth.
Right.
Yeah. Because here's what you want to think about. there are two potential candidates to be employed in the Roth IRA. Or said a different way, there are two ways to get money into the Roth IRA. One is to contribute, and if you've got income up to $7,000, if you're 50 plus, you can put $7,000 into a Roth IRA. So that's a contribution. And the other way is the conversion, and that's what we're talking about. And if you use part of your conversion to pay taxes, you took eligible money that could be deployed in the Roth IRA, and you deployed it for the purposes of paying taxes. Yeah. So this is where we want to be very, very specific when we give names and purposes to these dollars. We want this stuff working for us instead of the other way around.
That's exactly right. I would talk to maybe one more group. If you have traditionally had bigger refunds at tax time, maybe you've just been having extra taxes withheld at work or something like that, and you just always are getting a big refund when you file your taxes in the spring. It's possible that maybe you're not being as efficient from a tax standpoint, and that could actually represent some of the dollars to cover the tax on a Roth conversion. In other words, by doing a Roth conversion at the right level, you might be kind of mopping up some of that liquidity, some of that extra cash that would come on the tax return. And yes, it might mean that, that's not vacation money, or that's not new couch money, or big screen TV, but it could be way more valuable to you to actually use it to cover a Roth conversion.
Okay, so that's a great point. And this goes back to step one, why you want to do the tax projection first. I was working with some folks that were, their income was transitioning. And so we did the tax projection. And we already knew they were going to be in a lower tax bracket this year. And so I had already primed the pump. I taught Roth conversion, and they were on board. Yep, we're going to do this. And so now it got time to actually, all right, let's start the process. And as we're sharing that process with you right now. The first step is do tax projection. Turns out, because their income was lumpy, they had a lot more withholdings than we projected. They traditionally broken even on their taxes every year. They weren't used to getting a big tax refund. They were set to get about $6,000 back. And so but we already knew we were going to do this Roth conversion, so I shared this with them and everything. But we converted, 20 some grand, and we didn't withhold anything. Mm-hmm. And they didn't have to pay an estimate. It just we mopped up, like you said, Josh, good analogy, some of the tax refund that was going to be there anyway. So be careful. Yes, you can withhold taxes on a Roth conversion. Be careful doing that. Be careful if you're age 59 and a half or younger than age 59 and a half. And be careful if you have other dollars that could pay the tax instead, whether that's refund or not, because withholding taxes on the Roth conversion means less money is showing up in your Roth to grow tax-free. So,
and should we say anything about the possibility of a 60-day rollover and that, or not? Well, I'm sorry.
I don't care.
I feel like we're in between shows and not actually live here. So you just keep going, Mike. Sorry.
All right. So those are the first two steps. You got to figure out, you got to do a tax projection, see how much should you contribute, what are some of the consequences, does everything shape up the way you want it to? And then that tells you how much tax there is. So you then can proceed to step two and how you're going to pay that tax. Step three is you've got to decide which investments you're going to convert from your IRA, and then what you'll invest in your Roth IRA. Well, isn't that just normal? It's not. It's not. Let's talk about it.
Well, I mean, you've maybe heard us say on this show that accounts like a Roth IRA, they're often thought of as your longest term money. The money that you can let it grow as long as possible, way out into the future, maybe even past your lifetime, and it will be inherited by your kids or grandkids someday. And the reason for that is any growth that's occurring in a Roth IRA is tax-free. So how long do we want tax-free growth? Forever, if we could.
Yeah.
Right? And so to me, choosing investments that are more growth-oriented, maybe they have a little bit more volatility. You can stomach a little bit more swing when you know you're not touching this money for decades potentially. So to me, don't be too conservative with your Roth money would be kind of the moral of the story there.
Yeah, I would consider which investments to convert from. maybe investments that are down in value a little bit, or so maybe stock type investments, or if you've got a diversified stock portfolio and a few areas have gone down in value, think emerging markets or something like that, small caps or something like that, and then when you get into the Roth IRA, converting that and then investing in something that still has high growth potential. You wouldn't want to convert bond investments and keep them in bonds and Roth for most people, okay? You got to work with your CFP to see if that makes sense for you or not. All right, a couple more steps left on the Roth conversion. That more coming up on the Wise Money Show with Korhorn Financial Group. Yeah, we'll leave off the last step for that.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I was just thinking because a lot of times we'll convert 60,000 but we'll take 80,000 out and withhold the 20.
Okay.
And then do the 60-day rollover to get the 20 back into the IRA.
Yeah.
So that we only have a $60,000 tax bill, not 80.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I didn't.
No, that's all right. And we probably would have needed to say that 2 or 3 times, and then that would have used up a little bit of real estate. So that's good. Cool. Bonus content on YouTube. All right. Fourth segment, we've got decide when to do the Roth conversion, what time of year, and why that's important. We'll wrap it all up. I doubt that will take the full segment, so we can hop over to, I think there's a couple questions about Roth conversion, so we can, let me tee one up here. Thanks for being here. This is the Wise Money Show with Korhorn Financial Group. My name is Mike Bernard. With me in the KFG studios, Kevin Korhorn and Josh Gregory. If you've missed anything, every episode of the Wise Money Show is on podcast. Go check it out. Wherever you listen to podcasts, search the Wise Money Show, subscribe to it or follow us there, and then rate the program as well. We appreciate it. Can't tell you how many people that we've just run into or talked to this as the spring gets started here. Oh yeah, we were on the road trip for spring break or whatever, and we just binge listened to a bunch of episodes. So you can do that on podcast. Just search the Wise Money Show and follow us there. Okay, we're talking about the steps of doing a Roth conversion. Most people don't think about all these different things that need to be done before you actually execute the Roth conversion. But guys, this is the process. You do a tax projection to make sure you know that you're not going to create any unintended consequences, and that also helps you determine exactly how much to do, how much Roth conversion to do, and how much tax you need to figure out. And then that's step 2. How are you going to pay the tax? We really don't want to withhold taxes on a Roth conversion. Sometimes you have to. You really don't want to. Kevin, bonus content on YouTube, shared a creative strategy to cover the taxes that you might want to consider. Work with your CFP on that. Go to YouTube, search The Wise Money Show, follow us there, and you'll catch that additional idea. Third, you've got to figure out which investment strategies you want to pull out of the IRA to do the Roth conversion, and then what investment strategy do you want to use in your Roth. The Roth dollars should be typically your higher risk dollars so that you have more growth potential in the future, because that's the benefit of the Roth. The fourth step before you execute the Roth conversion, you've got to decide when to do the Roth conversion. We're not just talking in theory, when is right. No. What time of year to do it?
Well, so I guess there's a couple of schools of thought on this. One might be, well, the earlier the better, right? If this is going to be tax-free growth from this day forward, well, when do we get the clock ticking on that tax-free growth?
Because 4 out of 5 years, on average, are positive in the market. Mm-hmm. So do it in January, right? Do it January 2nd. So that's one school of thought.
Yeah, you could also time it based on when does it happen to be in a dip of some sort. So the market's down. Maybe you say, if the market ever goes down 10, 15% in a year, that's my timing. I'm going to do my Roth conversion at that point.
And you'd be in luck, because on average, there is a peak to trough drop of around 13% every single year in the stock market. So that's the second time. The third time is end of the year.
Yeah.
Because the risk with doing the Roth conversion too early is they got rid of something. Kevin, I'm going to have you explain this. They got rid of something called the Roth recharacterization, or the conversion recharacterization. Okay.
Yeah, the undo button.
The undo button. Well, and so if you do it too soon and then all of a sudden you get a surprise bonus, or or someone passes away and you receive some dollars that for some reason are taxable to you. I don't know. Like if something comes up and changes your tax picture, that could change the amount that you could. I mean, it could change whether you should have done a Roth conversion to begin with.
Yeah, or you're a business owner and you're on a cash basis and you don't know what checks are going to come in before the end of the year.
Right.
That's a good
So
point.
it could switch your income. So it used to be that you could do a Roth conversion and then you could recharacterize it. So when we were doing this, it didn't have to be exact science because you'd say, well, if it made sense to convert 20,000, let's convert 30 and see how it goes. And in the event we want to, we can peel back, some. We could actually peel back all of it if the surprise was big enough. And now we cannot do that. So the precision with which we calculate the tax burden on the conversion is much, much, much more important now.
That's right. I mean, as much as we talk about doing tax projections on this show, I don't know. I'm a bit of a chicken when it comes to doing conversions too early in the year because of those unknowns. It all depends on how stable is someone's income. Are there potential curveballs flying at you? Are they a business owner, as you said, Kevin? Is their income does it vary from year to year quite a bit? So to me, ironically, when we talk about tax projections, I like to do it late in the year so that you're not projecting too many months worth of income.
Yeah.
You're knowing a whole bunch of months worth of income.
Yeah.
So,
it's in the books. You know. I mean, because I feel a little schizophrenic when it comes to this because I'm like, convert January 2nd. That gives me 15 months to pay the taxes.
Yeah.
So I've got that money and time is on my side. But I also like doing it in late November, early December, because I've got 10/12 of the year behind me.
I mean, and that's the thing. When we started the show talking about when would you consider doing a Roth conversion? What are some of the times? And the very first time is, my income's lower than what I expected this year. And so if you just tie this together, that means those of you that should be considering Roth conversions have some, variability in your income. And yet to do the Roth conversion right away in the year is really for someone that has stability in their income, right? And so Josh, if you're chicken, I'm chicken too or something.
Chicken Little.
Because absolutely I want to do it as early as possible in the year. I just am finding that doesn't make sense for many people. If it does, fantastic.
Yeah.
But if not, in January 2nd of 2020, did 70% of the 30% of the people expect to lose their jobs 4 months later? No. Did we expect a shutdown? I remember at a pizza joint with a friend saying, "Have you heard about this COVID thing? What's going on in Wuhan?" And I had to pretend like, "Oh yeah, I know." That was the end of January. Had no idea. And a month later, we were all in lockdown. So you just don't know. Like income can change, and so anyway.
That's exactly right. I have a client who every year we know we're going to do a Roth conversion because they happen to be, he's retired, but they're waiting until age 70 to start drawing Social Security. So we're living off of taxable investments. So they have a significant portfolio, but that taxable portfolio can kick off an unpredictable amount of income from year to year, depending on what kind of capital gains get pushed through to their tax return and everything. So we know we're going to do it. In fact, we're even setting aside the money to pay the tax each year, but we don't pull the trigger until the end of the year when we know how everything has shaken out.
Yep. So those are the steps. Once you've confirmed that, yep, a Roth conversion makes sense by doing a tax projection, and we already shared there's several things that you clarify doing that. Then you decide how you're going to cover the tax, and then what investment strategy am I going to pull from, and what will my investment strategy be in the Roth? And then fourth, when are you going to do it? You're going to do it earlier in the year? You're going to wait for a pullback in the market? Hopefully there is one. You're going to do it at the end of the year. Once you decide that, then you're ready. you're ready to pull the trigger at the right time to execute the Roth conversion, whether that's, signing paperwork or whether that's logging in, or hopefully that's just communicating to your CFP, and your CFP just takes care of it for you.
That's right.
That's the process.
This is one of the times when having your IRA and your Roth IRA under the same management with the same company just helps so much with the logistics.
Yeah.
It's so much easier to be able to do the tax projection, work out the right amount of conversion, and then just let your certified financial planner handle it, often with no paperwork involved or anything.
Isn't that one of the steps? You've got to have a Roth IRA open at the same custodian. Can you do a Roth conversion from one custodian to the next?
You can, but I don't know that anyone would. I mean, it's just messier, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure you can.
I think there is a way.
But you can do an indirect rollover. You can receive a distribution from a traditional IRA and contribute it to a Roth IRA within 60 days.
Yeah.
You do the trustee to trustee or direct rollover.
Well,
but really, what you're talking about is the same trustee transfer.
That would just be messy. So yes, you have an IRA open because that's where you're doing the Roth conversion from, but you need a Roth IRA open.
Yeah, I mean this is all how the sausage is made stuff. Like most folks want to know what time it is. They don't want to know how to build a watch.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so if you are a financial delegator, make sure you're delegating this to your certified financial planner.
Okay, if you're going through the process of opening up a Roth IRA because you're going to do the conversion for the very first time. Mm-hmm. So you have IRA money, you don't have a place for it to land yet, so you're going to open a new Roth IRA. I would give you a homework assignment to let that also prompt you to check all the beneficiaries on all your accounts when you're setting up that account. When you open the Roth IRA, one of the forms that you're going to sign is who receives this money if I were to pass away prematurely. And so you're already thinking about it. It's fresh ideas that are going on that beneficiary form. Well, make sure that they still match your other intentions as well. So, taking intervals like these types of events or milestones to hit the refresh button or to check again to make sure that things as small in detail like who is listed as a beneficiary, it's important to just do that periodically. And even when you're diligent at this, you can get accounts that just aren't consistent. So cleaning that stuff up, I think, is important periodically.
Yep. Okay. Last thing that I would share, and then we're going to hit a question from a fan of the show that's related to this, and that is all of this. This entire show, this is not a substitute for financial planning. You got to be working with your CFP and look at all the reasons why. Should you do this? Should you not do this? And then walk through that plan. Work with your CFP. Make sure that CFP is doing comprehensive financial planning. Otherwise, you mentioned Roth conversion, and they're gonna, go ahead. Yeah, good idea. Do it. As opposed to following these steps. All right. So, fan of the show, Big Tony, has a couple questions in the bank. By the way, next week we're going to be doing a show of just questions from fans of the show. But he said, "Hey, I thought taxes owed on a Roth conversion had to be paid within the quarter that the conversion's made. Recently, you mentioned waiting until tax time to pay them. If so, it makes sense to do the conversion early in the year and then waiting the 12 to 16 months to pay it. Here's the deal. You've got to know your situation, right? If you have enough taxes already paid in and withheld to cover safe harbor, meaning you're not going to have a penalty, then wait to pay them at tax time, okay? If you're not going to meet safe harbor, then you are either going to want to withhold on that Roth conversion, which we already said is a no-no, or second, you're going to want to pay an estimate in the amount that, to get you to safe harbor or to cover the tax in the quarter that you do the Roth conversion. Anything else to add on there, guys?
No, I mean you could also do the 60-day rollover, but that's
absolutely
a little more complexity.
I work with your CFP on that for sure. And Big Tony, love it, on YouTube. Great questions, right? You've got a few more in here that we're hoping to hit next week as well. But this one, work with your CFP. Make sure that you're in safe harbor and that you pay the right amount. It's very possible that you should do this earlier in the year and then have a bigger tax bill later on, but you'd want to avoid penalty. So, All right, that's all the time we have for today. On behalf of Josh Gregory, Kevin Korhorn, all of us at Korhorn Financial Group, have a great weekend. We'll see you next Saturday for the Wise Money Show with Korhorn Financial Group.
Securities offered through Silver Oak Securities, member FINRA/SIPC. Advisory services offered through KFG Wealth Management, LLC. Doing business as Korhorn Financial Group. KFG Wealth Management, LLC and Silver Oak Securities Incorporated companies are unaffiliated.